Welcome to the Paranormal Papa Podcast, brought to you from Ferocious Feline Studios in Cassopolis, Michigan. Today, we have got a gift, literally. We're going to listen to Joe Nickell. He's a skeptic, a writer, an investigator. I should say was. Sadly, we lost Joe on March 4th of this year. For many years, Joe has worked on Discovery Channel, National Geographic. He's done undercover investigations into the paranormal and the supernatural. He's a hilarious, funny man, and I am very sad that we've lost such a great individual, because not only was he a skeptic, but he was an open-minded skeptic. And it's truly sad that we've lost such a great person. But today we're going to listen to a pre-recorded show from Skepticon 4 from 2024 of Joe on stage talking about some of his work, his undercover work, into proving or disproving the paranormal and supernatural. He talks about his visits to Camp Chesterfield in Chesterfield, Indiana, spiritual camp, and some of the other folks that he has investigated undercover. Like I said, he's a very humorous man, and I really hope you guys enjoy this.
Our first speaker is paranormal investigator Joe Nickell.
Oh, maybe it does work. Oh, okay. Well, I'm a paranormal investigator, and I thought maybe you'd be interested in how I became that way. I was resident magician at the Houdini Hall of Fame for 3 years, and during the course of that, got to know the amazing Randy and other magicians. And I thought it would be wonderful fun to investigate the paranormal like Randy was doing. I already had an interest, and I began with the Ghost at Mackenzie House, a famous haunted house in Toronto, where late at night people would hear footsteps on the stairs, and the house was locked and there was no one in the house. Do you need any more proof of ghosts than that? Oh no, right, this is a skeptical audience. Oh, that's, okay, I just forgot for a moment. So I went on scene and investigated and found that next door to the house, in the building next door, about 40 inches away, was a parallel iron staircase and a late night cleanup crew. And that was my first big solved paranormal mystery, and from then on I thought, this is what you do. You have to actually go on scene and investigate. And if you do, people will believe you, and they will love you for it. Well, not so much. But one of the reasons that I think so many of the paranormal investigators have been magicians, Houdini, Randy, moi, and many others, is because they are familiar with the illusions involved. Let me introduce you to the word illusion. This looks like a pair of scissors. Would you agree? Nod your heads, yes. Okay. Yes, looks like a pair of scissors. This looks like a piece of rope. Looks like the rope has two ends. Looks like it has one center. Looks like I'm cutting said rope. Would you agree? Looks like that. Now it looks like I'm tying the pieces of rope back together. But what you don't know is that I'm using something called a slip knot. It's called that because if you don't want it here, you could just slip it here. In fact, You could slip it here or slip it off, put it in your pocket, and the rope would be magically restored. Okay, so that's an illusion. And there's no extra charge for that, for the show. No extra charge. However, as you may know, most people's talks are thinly disguised commercials for the books they've written. This talk will be no exception. And after my talk, by the strangest paranormal coincidence, copies of a couple of my books have appeared outside, and I will be available. Well, enough said about that. Not too much, but enough, perhaps, said. But I want to talk again about illusion before I start my particular little show, because much of the paranormal involves, not as some debunking skeptics think, rather stupid people who are liars and just stupid yokels and so forth, but actually perfectly sane and sober and sincere and intelligent people who have seen something unusual. And these unusual things often happen to skeptics as well. And so I invite you to think about it. For example, many people, and I've been in their homes along the margins of Lake Okanagan in British Columbia, or Lake Crescent, Newfoundland, or Lake Memphremagog in Quebec. Many people have seen a long-necked, multi-humped, undulating creature, 30, 40, 50 or more feet long. Now, science says that these lakes, by and large, are about 10,000 or so years old. They're left over from the last ice age. And so any kind of ancient plesiosaur or other creature being in a 10,000-year-old lake is pretty much nonsense. And that such a lake would not support the necessary breeding herd of such animals. One animal can't perpetuate itself, but you would need a breeding population. And if you had many of these animals, eventually there would be one of them, surely, that died and floated to the surface or washed up on shore. And yet, multiple witnesses across the globe have seen a creature, and I've talked to many of these people in their homes. So the nature of my business is to try to explain this irreconcilable difference. And in fact, I've come to realize that people have seen something that looks just like they described. And so, rather than the skeptics saying, oh yeah, they saw a lake monster, I find that offensive. Or, yeah, they saw a lake monster. This is mean-spirited stuff, and if the idea is for the skeptic to show how much more superior and how much smarter he is than those little people, let me just say to you that I don't know any little people, except skeptics who might misbehave like that. So, and the irony is that often the debunking skeptics who do that don't have the foggiest idea what the explanation is. Well, let me share that with you quickly. I just want to make this point before I go further. What I think many of these people have seen is a creature known as Lutra canadensis. It has a long neck. It's almost all neck. And it's not that long, but if you put 1, 2, 3, 4 river otters swimming in a line, playing follow the leader as they do, maybe a mother and pups, or just playing follow the leader, just sporting, you can see how these what looks like a 3 or 4 humped creature by an illusion, being pre-programmed to think of a long creature, how this illusion could take place. I've been accused of suggesting that all lake monsters are otters, and of course I've said no such thing. Some are beavers. Some are floating logs. Some are hoaxes. Not many of them are due to people drinking that I've found. So I just leave that with you. I want to talk now. I hope this is working. It is. Okay. Let me get where I can see the screen myself. When I was a magician and starting the paranormal, after a while I decided I really wanted to have a career doing this, and I decided that to really be effective, I needed to sharpen my detective skills. So I then went and worked with the world's oldest and largest private detective agency. I'm not supposed to use their name for publicity, but if you're asking, did their name start with a P? Do they go after the Jesse James gang? I can't say. But much of the work that I did was undercover work. I would go in as a warehouseman, shipper receiver, stock clerk, what have you, and I would try to get on the inside of theft operations. And one time I was a member of a theft gang. Work that either was not very exciting or was too exciting. It was rarely in between. But I have seen from that vantage point, I've seen situations where you could have had all the security apparatus you wanted, guards, whatever, and we would have stolen you blind right under your nose, and you would have smiled and signed everything as we did it. It's the undercover operative who can solve many crimes. So when I got into paranormal investigation, it turned out that, I could just be me and go somewhere and not say I was investigating, and that would work. Until I started appearing on TV shows. And then at Virgin Mary sites and other places, there would be exclamations like, happened once to me in front of some Learning Channel cameras, "It's him!" And it's pretty scary when there are thousands of people there that might go after you. So I started using undercover techniques. Here I am at Camp Chesterfield in Indiana. This is a famous spiritualist site, and I went as this old codger, Jim Collins. I shaved off my mustache. I had just been on Dateline NBC, where I helped them catch John Edward cheating. If any of you ever saw that episode. Yes, that's right. Right. If you read, don't buy the book. It's okay if you borrow a copy, read it in the bookstore, steal a copy. I don't care. But no, I didn't say that. But if you turn towards the back of the book, you'll see where John Edward talks about how Dateline NBC and Psychop and Joe Nickell had their gotcha moment with him. I think that's right, John. We got you. We got you cheating. That's right. I don't know why he put it in his book, but maybe he's not as bright as some people think. Well, so this had just happened, and he was, Mr. Big at Camp Chesterfield. So I thought these people might have seen me. So I shaved my mustache and put on this outrageous garb and limped painfully into Camp Chesterfield and told anyone who would listen about the death of my mother and how guilt-ridden and grief-stricken I was, and yada, yada, yada. When I went into one of the churches at Camp Chesterfield, they had a reading. The people would be given, as you went in the door, you'd be given a slip like this. Please address your billet. A billet's a little slip of paper. to one or more loved ones in spirit, giving first and last names. Ask one or more questions and sign your full name. And I went under the guise of Jim Collins. Little in-joke there, that was the name of Houdini's assistant. So Jim would, painfully went back up to the door with his slip of paper and asked the lady, he said, now, tell me again how I'm supposed to fold this. And she said, oh, you fold it just in half, because if you fold it any other way, they won't read it. Well, I know many ways to do the billet reading trick, and I was pretty well on to this one right away. Imagine that you've got a basket and we're collecting these slips from you. And suppose you fold yours into a triangle and you fold yours in half and half again and you pleat yours. If you hold one up to your forehead, you might recognize that's not mine. That's not mine. He doesn't want you to be able to do that. He wants them all to look alike. And while one is being drawn out of the basket and held up here, under cover of a podium, say, the other hand is doing this. Got it? So the medium was reading off this person and that person. People were crying and getting messages from their dead parents and dead children. Powerful stuff. And I'm sitting in the back of the theater, of the church. And he says, I have a message for the Collins family. Here, back here, I say. Me. And begins to give the names of the Collins family members. I had written the question, Mother, will you be with me always? And he read off the names and he said, I have a message from your mother. She wants you to know she'll always be there for you. It was very moving. I was nearly on the verge of tears. And then I remembered that at that time my mother was still alive and wasn't named Mrs. Collins. And I felt so much better because I had caught another trickster. And my expose in Skeptical Inquirer magazine resulted in about 3 mediums being ousted from the grounds of Camp Chesterfield, for which I am particularly proud. My great friend and mentor, the amazing Randy, James Randy of JREF, he used some undercover techniques to oust this guy, Peter Popoff. How many of you know the Popoff story? Oh, it's very well known, okay. How many, well, maybe I should ask how many don't. Okay, quite enough. I'll give you the short version. Peter Popoff was a faith-healing evangelist who could do, among other amazing things, not only heal people, but he could have a word of power. God would speak to him. And so he might say, I'm getting the name so-and-so. And I'm getting such and such an address. And I'm getting a problem with the eyes, or what have you. And Randy and some others began to wonder why Popoff, if he could heal himself, needed a hearing aid. And they thought a little bit about it, and they thought they might have something going, so they slip into the place undercover and using a radio intercept device. And Randy went on Johnny Carson's show playing first to the audience this amazing demonstration of how he knew people's names and ailments and stuff, and he'd never met them. Knew them just like that. And then he played the same scene, letting the audience hear what you could hear in Popoff's hearing aid. And it sounded something like this. Hello, Petey, can you hear me? If not, we're both in trouble. And this was the voice of Mrs. Popoff backstage, reading from the prayer cards people had filled out prior to the show. Overnight, Randy put him out of business. Overnight. Years later, Popoff had made a recovery. I'll get to these points if you'll give me a moment. Popoff made a recovery, and I decided to go and check him out. And I can tell you that he healed me of a back injury, which I didn't have, and some other ailments that I didn't have, but I've felt good ever since. And he was not doing the famous trick anymore, so Randy stopped him from that. This is John of God. Do you know him? The Brazilian healer. And he appeared in Atlanta, and I was working at that time on a number of programs with National Geographic Television. I did maybe a dozen programs for Is It Real? If you remember that series. And maybe you remember me, I was the guy who would come on and say, no, it isn't real. Remember that guy? Yeah, that was me. And John of God was up to his usual tricks there in Atlanta. And I'm one slide out of order. Sorry. Can you find the undercover guy? Is it the guy with the big beard? Wouldn't that be a great guys? No, that was actually just one of the people. This is me there in the ugly glasses, and there I am with the cane again. The cane's great if you're gonna look pitiful. And John of God would be psychically told by the spirits what people's conditions were and so forth. And I was really impressed that the spirits did not whisper in his ear that I was a phony, that I was there under false pretenses, that I was trying to trap him, trick him, catch him. And I did manage to do that, and this was on National Geographic Television. Now the one I slipped, Benny Hinn. Benny Hinn is another faith-healing evangelist. He studied under Catherine Kuhlman, the woman who worked miracles. And I've been to Benny Hinn's concerts. He does an amazing thing where he simply heals people out there. He says, someone over here is being healed of a back injury. Someone way in the back is being healed of witchcraft. You know who you are. And so on. And then those people self-select, you see. He invites them up on stage, not to be healed. You see, they've already healed. And then he has them go under the power, which is just suggestion. You touch them and they fall down. It's method acting. People know what they're supposed to do, and they do it. Well, this is Phil Jordan. Phil Jordan is a psychic detective and a psychic. You've maybe seen him on TV a few times. He's an incredible guy who can talk to the dead and get clairvoyant visions and so forth. What most of the psychic detectives are doing, this is just a great generalization, but what most of them are doing is a trick called retrofitting. They throw out a few clues. I see water. I'm getting the number 7. I see a tall structure. And the police invariably say, Frank, that mean anything to you? No, Charlie, I don't know what that is. That doesn't help me any. But when the police finally do find the missing person's body, then and these clues were never of any help. They're found by a tipster or a tracking dog or something. Afterwards, the psychic encourages the police to think, remember I mentioned water and they were found near a creek or a stream, a pond, a lake, the margin of an ocean, Riverside Drive, a water tower, Remember the tall structure? You see how this works. And there were 7 people in the search party. Remember 7? Or it was 7 miles out of town, or the sheriff's license plate had ended in 7, or you see how this works. It fooled many otherwise sensible detectives, even with this trick. Well, anyway, Phil Jordan's fame rests on basically one case where basically what he did was he saw the missing boy, who was still alive, fortunately. He saw him in an area that was the only area that hadn't yet been searched in the general area where the boy had gone missing. And he was actually nowhere near the boy when the boy was actually found by the searchers, but was in a ravine, kind of totally disconnected from the boy. So it doesn't look very amazing unless you hear him tell the story, and then it looks pretty impressive. Well, he set himself up with a hotel at Seneca Falls in New York, and I decided to go in one of my makeovers and just take the measure of Phil Jordan. And I went as Johnny Adams, and that just indicates that I'm one person at this little table, Johnny Adams. And I went as a, garrulous old guy with ugly teeth and so forth. I don't show pictures of all my garbs because then I can't use them anymore. So I don't use them. But anyway, suffice it to say that Johnny got a reading from Phil, and all Phil did was a generalized reading for some character like I was purporting to be. He said nothing of any meaning to me. For example, I learned in 2003 that I had a daughter I'd never known about. And I inherited a beautiful daughter and 2 grandsons overnight. And I thought back on that for 36 or 7 years. No fortune teller, no medium, no psychic, no tarot card reader, no astrologer. And I've been, believe me when I tell you, I've been to many of these people. Not one of them told me that. Discouraging, isn't it? And Phil did no better. And he signed his book for his friend Johnny. Well, disconcerting. Here's another one of the fortune tellers. This one's in Mexico, and this is a tarot card reader in Tijuana. I had gone on this one as a terminally ill prostate cancer patient. I, in fact, actually had a prostate cancer scare once, and it was a role I could play rather effectively. And he directed his reading to that false statement. In other words, this is one way to test psychics is to use a false persona, a false story, and then see if they spot it. If they buy into it, how psychic are they? Shouldn't Phil Jordan have said, "I'm getting strange feelings over here. I'm seeing a large wooden nickel. What does that mean?" Or something. Or I'm getting bad vibrations. There's trickery in the air. No, they just happily, Anyway, so here I am at a Tijuana clinic that sells hope. Yes, they sell hope. And I was there to see if they would sell me things that are illegal here, like Leotril, and they would sell you pretty much anything you wanted. And I simply went in. I had a friend who was hovering over me, and I played the part of someone who had a diagnosis of cancer, and in fact lowered my voice, and with my voice trembling, I confessed to the person there that I was scared. And it really is very frightening to see how people can be preyed upon this way, that false hope, all kinds of just bogus therapies, that prayer therapy, for example. And you pay for this. Well, the way to find out some of these things is to go undercover, I think. No particular disguise there because I wasn't expecting to be recognized in Tijuana. Here is a stigmatist, Lillian Bernis, and I showed up at one of her bleedings, and I shook her bloody hand. And as we stood in line to meet her and talk to her, she was hugging the lady in front of me. So she was presenting her hands, you see, pretty much right under my nose. I almost pulled out my magnifying glass. But I didn't. But I got a really good look at her wounds, and as far as I'm concerned, they were self-inflicted. And they were only on the backs of her hands, not the palms, only on the tops of her feet, not the soles, and just a little nick or two around the forehead. And the blood dried up. In other words, she was already bleeding when she walked out in front of the crowd. There was nothing mysterious. Wouldn't it have been amazing to see her unblemished? And right before, like me, right while I'm talking to you, if you saw a wound open and blood come out, wouldn't that be impressive? Oh, you'd think I was doing a magic trick, but you'd be impressed, wouldn't you? Right? No, I'm not going to do it. Am I? But anyway. And here I am. I appear to be worshipfully venerating the holy blood of Christ at Bruges, Belgium. But take a closer look. Am I really venerating the vial of holy blood? Or just getting a good look? That's right. This is for my book, the Relics of the Christ. And I stood in the pilgrim line just as another pilgrim, and I needed a second look, so I just got back in line, and if you're holding up a banknote, you can go through the line often and just wave some money. Money well spent. I could see from the look of the blood that it was waxy, that it was still bright red. It was, in other words, looked everything unlike real blood. And now I want to take you to Patricia Bartlett's place at the Lilydale Spiritualist Center. It's like, I'm just checking my time, Lilydale is like Camp Chesterfield. It's a place where the spiritualists have little cottages. It's a really scenic place in upstate New York. I go there often. The mediums usually turn away from me angrily. Some of the other people, though, will come up and hug me. I had a very good friend there, Joyce LaJudas, in the museum, and I had special museum privileges. I could go and take the rare Davenport Boys scrapbook and open it up, take it out of the display case and study it. They wouldn't let the mediums touch it, but I could do that because she felt that I was an open-minded skeptic, and she was an open-minded believer, and we were very good friends, and I miss her very much. She's dead now. But her successor said to me, he said, I want you to know that you still have museum privileges here, because he said, I know that's what Joyce would have wanted. He said, I know you don't believe she's still with us, but I believe she is, and I know that's what she would want. And I said, well, you're right, I don't believe that, but I really am touched by the sincerity of your feeling. And so I think sometimes we can be friends with people on the other side. I'm not talking about the other side. No. But in this particular case, I was not so well known at this time at Lilydale, and I checked out this woman. I could tell she didn't know me from Adam. And so I made arrangements. She said, come back when it's off season. And so I went back off season when it was not so busy. And what she does, or did, she's also passed away, but Patricia Bartlett was a spirit artist. She did spirit drawings. She wasn't a very good artist, but she would, if you were sitting down, if you came for a spirit drawing, it was disconcerting. It was sort of like if you were at Coney Island, they look at you and they sketch you, right? Well, not the spirit artists. They're looking right over your shoulder, and you're going, it's a little disconcerting. And they're drawing the imagined spirit guide. And they're usually Native Americans, as you see, because they were so close to nature. Spirit guide portraits, $50 by appointment. And I thought, yeah, that's for me. That's for me. I have a spirit picture to put in my office, among my other bric-a-brac. So I went, and on the way there, I made up a story, and as as Mrs. Bartlett, who was the sweetest little old lady, just really charming, she got her pastels ready, and I said, "You know, ma'am, I think I saw my spirit guide once." "Oh," she said, perking right up. I said, "Yes, it was a terrible time in my life, and I was blah, blah, blah. And I woke up one night, and I saw this Native American standing by my bed. I'll never forget it. He had 3 yellow feathers standing up. And then he said, 'Everything will be all right, my son.' And I don't remember what happened after that. I must have gone back to sleep." She said, "That's it. That's what they do. That's your spirit guide. Yes, you did see your spirit guide." And she said, would you like for me to draw your spirit guide for you?" I said, "It would mean a lot to me." Did I mention the 3 yellow feathers? And so she says, "Now I'm seeing," she looks off and she says, "I'm seeing a big, strong," yes, and I'm nodding, yes. She said, "Now I don't see his hair, I don't see it," no, I said, "I see it more." And pretty soon she said, "Yes, I think I have him." She said, we can give him a name. We're permitted to do that. We could call him Yellowbird." I said, "Oh, for the 3 yellow feathers." "Yes, we could call him Yellowbird." So she proceeded then to draw. And I want you to see this is my spirit guide. Isn't that sweet? Now here's the thing. Here's the thing I want you to think about for a moment. Did we prove that she's a fraud? No, because we don't know whether she said, "Oh yeah, okay, the guy wants a Native American with 3 yellow feathers. I'll collect the sucker's money and get $50. Or did she, being perhaps a fantasy-prone personality, could she just picture Yellowbird when I described him? Just picture it in her sweet little mind and just see him right there and draw him. Which is the case? I don't know. But I'm convinced that Yellowbird exists no more than he did before I drove there. Finally, I just want to mention a couple of things from recent endeavors. I think my time is about running out. Is that right? Am I doing just fine? Don't wake her up. No, she's really doing well. I got a call a few years ago from a Hollywood scriptwriter, and he wanted to interview me, and we had some conversations, and they were doing some kind of movie, had an idea, and eventually we began to be getting requests for copies of the magazine and some things from Skeptical Inquirer. And so our executive director, Barry Carr, said, he emailed him, "What are you doing?" They said, "Oh, we're making a movie with Hilary Swank." And Barry said, "Well, they told a little about the movie. It's about a miracle detective, a skeptic." Barry said, "Well, you ought to get Joe Nickell's book, Looking for a Miracle." Did I mention that's on sale out there? I may have neglected to mention that. And so they said, "Oh yes, we have several copies. Hillary is reading it right now." So eventually, Warner Brothers had me down on the set. I got to meet Hillary. I got to watch a little bit of the filming, and it was awful. It was just really awful. But Hilary Swank is just something else. She's just as good as we all thought she was in a very, very bad movie. But she's playing a character based on my work. I just wanted to just show you just for a moment. And I think you can see why she would be chosen to play me. I think so. Thank you very much.
And there you go, the late, great, and always amazing Joe Nickell, paranormal investigator, open-minded skeptic, writer. I love how he done his story on investigating these different psychics, clairvoyants. Of course, you know, he touched on Camp Chesterfield in Chesterfield, Indiana, which, growing up in close proximity to the town of Chesterfield, I'm very familiar with Camp Chesterfield. I was there over our home hauntings and some of the things that I seen and felt many times. Joe was he was an amazing individual. To be an investigator and to maintain that skeptic attitude is just amazing. He relied so much on his own feelings, and not just his investigative work or his work as a skeptic, but to be able to discern in yourself, in your mind, you know, what feels like it's real and what feels like fakery. And maybe working in illusion and magic for so long, that really helped him to be able to discern the difference between the two. And you know, the world is a much sadder place. The paranormal and the supernatural is a much sadder place with Joe's passing. But I'd like to thank you for tuning in to episode 5 of the Paranormal Papa Podcast, brought to you from Ferocious Feline Studios in Cassopolis, Michigan. I'm loving where this is going, y'all. It is absolutely amazing to be able to run across these old shows and even bring to you some new interviews from paranormal groups, skeptics, demonologists, supernaturalists, psychics, mediums, clairvoyants, etc. If you'd like to appear on the Paranormal Papa Podcast, drop me a line at livinghistorycomesalive@gmail.com, or you can get a hold of me on Facebook Messenger at Drew Ellsworth-MacRae. Once again, this has been episode 5 of the Paranormal Papa Podcast with the amazing, late, great Joe Nickell. Y'all, until next time, y'all take care of yourselves, take care of each other. God bless you, God love you, we do. And happy hunting.